Hi, thank you so much for joining us for this series of illustrated conversations entitled Still Life. Still Life is a series of 10 illustrated conversations between Nature Morte artists and me that takes this time of stillness to consider a theme constant across an artist's body of work. This series will take a short text, such as a piece of poetry, short story, or the lyrics of a song, selected by an artist as a conceptual guide to navigate across their diverse bodies of work, considering why the artist still returns to this source of inspiration across dynamically changing times and why this concern is still relevant today. Of course, this title is also a play off the word Nature Morte, which also means still life. And this episode features a conversation between Manish Nai in Mumbai and me in Bali. You won't be seeing video footage of me or Manish Nai in this illustrated conversation. One of the problems that I grapple with is that sometimes the persona or personality of the maker or the curator can be too present in these days of social media and branding, and it has the potential to eclipse the work and the ideas on the table. We want the work and the ideas to live far beyond us, so Manish and I took a conscious choice that we want the artworks to illustrate the words and ideas between us. So Manish, thank you so much for joining me across digital space today. Why don't you read out the quote that we've decided to focus on?
Hi Diana. Thank you so much for inviting for this. Yes, I can start with this quote which I have read many years back, and the quote is about Masanobu Fukuoka. So the value of nothing. You observed nature closely, surrendered to it, and over time realized that do nothing was not abandonment, but the order of nature. Doing nothing does not mean being passive. His message was this: information comes to you without experimenting. Once you develop receptors to receive the message, then everything tells you. Every object is continuously broadcasting, receive it. So this quote is I have read maybe in my art school 20 years back, and I was understanding that this quote is by Fukuoka, but later I did proper googling, and then I realized that it is about him. It is not direct quote by him, and since last many years this quote was on my desktop and very inspirational quote. So I thought let's start with this.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful quote you found, and I also found through research that this is actually a quote by a Pune-based farmer named Vijay Vishnu Bhatt, who was inspired by Fukuoka.
Yes.
And I think it's so beautiful. Oh, I love the title, the value of nothing.
Yes.
And thinking about like values and nothingness, something I found so interesting in my COVID-19 times in Bali is this generative space being found between two contradictory value systems. So like on one side, looking at Western modernist rationalist thought systems, we're told I think therefore I am, like Descartes, right? That our being is based on our thoughts. But then on the other side, like in Hindu and Buddhist belief traditions surrounding me here, or also you in India, we work to obtain a state of thoughtlessness to find the core of our being, right? So you're supposed to work to remove all thought. And these are two things that we're both taught to do at the same time. And one of my favorite states of being in a time when I was a dancer was when your mind completely shuts off and you just rely on muscle memory and music. It's like this exhilarating feeling to be stuck in a process. And I know that your artistic process is very similar, Manish, like one where repetition and kind of a daily process takes you into a transformative state of making. And I really look forward to letting others into this intimate process between you, your hands, your community, and the materials found around your studio that's embedded in all of your work. But before we get that, before we get there, can you tell me more about where you found, I think it was a photocopied book about Fukuoka where you found this quote, right?
It was in my my art school. It was 4th year in art school, where I saw this Xerox book of Xerox copy of this book, and I saw that because one class was like 3-4 days, and that the book was moving each desk. And then suddenly one day it was near to me, and I just saw that the book, and also the this quote about Fukuoka, and this is how I never read that book, but the quote with me always, and it was very inspiring, like that I mentioned.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, and I think something that's interesting, because Masanobu Fukuoka was one of the, proponents of organic farming, a real visionary
Yes.
also of this idea of slow farming.
Yes.
And a material that you've been working with for a long time, jute, has a deep connection to the history of farming.
Yes.
So
Yes.
for some of our visitors who might not know this history, jute is a crop that was a cash crop. Jute farming was something that really decapacitated many communities in South Asia, and it's deeply embedded in the colonial history and independence movements in South Asia. And people like me who have studied colonial histories tend to immediately jump into this reading, this political and economic and reading of the materiality of jute. But your connection to jute is very personal,
Yes.
and something that only you can feel in your own unique way. So can you tell us more about how you came to work with jute? And tell us more.
So it is personal connection, because my father was running packing material business, like tarpaulin, cardboards, and also jute was one of he was trading with, and so always these material samples front of me. I was also going with him to sometime with this factory, so I have this all childhood memories with him. And also, but very common in Bombay, we see this material to use for the facades, construction sites, but also the display in exhibition center. So, and also the bags. So this is how we also see this material commonly. With me, it's like it's available at home. And then.
And you had quite a bit of extra supply too, right? Like when your father's jute company went bankrupt, correct? Like you had this material that suddenly, had lost its value.
Yes, yeah. When I was in, I think it was in 2001, when I was in last year of my art school. That time, it was again like a recession in this kind of cloth market or this kind of packing material market. It was a very slow down and kind of a recession. So he quite he almost lost his business, and then also same time so much material available at home. The same time I was also experimenting in my work different material and surfaces. Within that I tried and used especially jute material as a surface in my painting. This is how it starts.
Yeah, and I think it's really beautiful. It's a beautiful story of creating value from nothing, which is also the header of the quote we're talking about here.
So basically he lost and I began with this same material.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
He lost his business completely, and because everything is available at home, and then began with the same material in my work. And since last 15 years I'm still using this material in my work.
And like you said, like jute was usually seen as a packing material. So something
Yes.
like, under the British, it was something to package and ship
Yes.
goods out of India and Bangladesh and Pakistan and that whole
Yeah.
area of British India in order to benefit the economies of the colonial power.
Yeah.
But you are not looking at jute as a packing material. You're looking at as like the main thing with value, right? You've given value to something that was only used to
Yes.
extract value. And I think maybe it would be beautiful to hear you talk about the way that your work with jute has transformed, like as you just spent time with it and started to see the different potentials and the different messages that came to you. Like we talked about you starting to paint on the canvas and then getting rid of the paint, getting rid of the brush, and it turning into sculpture. Can you tell us a bit about that process?
Yes, basically it was it was assignment in the art school where we have to try different surfaces, on canvas, or we have to try painting by using different surfaces. So I have tried couple of these surfaces, therapy and also jute, but cardboard, and more or less I I I I liked, and I saw the possibility on jute more and more. And but surface, I was using the thick jute, uh, which very rough surface, which has very rough surface. So in the beginning it was bit trouble for me to paint. So far I have done before watercolor painting, so to try this kind of rough surface, it was little, I was facing little difficulties. And so then I tried paper called gateway tracing, which architect use for the drawings, which has a quality of little transparent, but also you can paint nicely on it. So I did pasted this paper on jute cloth, and then through that I can also see through jute, and also I can paint on the gateway paper surface. So this is how I started my watercolor wash technique. So I was using jute as a surface that you can see, but also the strokes and wash technique of watercolor. And this is how in the beginning I have started my painting with my surface. And in the beginning I tried to understand jute, but later also the material also slowly responding how to. Yeah, this is what happened when you're more spending time with your things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then back to this idea of nothing, like tell me how you started to figure out that pulling out threads from the jute cloth was a generative space, right? Trying to take that full and complete and dense cloth into a state of nothingness by removing individual threads. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yes, because I was continued this process 3 or 4 years by painting and wash and this kind of techniques. But later also I was same time struggling how to push this process more and more. And within that I realized that if I can pull out thread from jute cloth, I can create my simple patterns. And then I was searching more refined material, small grain material within the jute, and I found couple of color jute fabric in market. So this is how the watercolor went away a little bit, and then I directly started using this jute, colorful jute, and also same time pulling out thread process. This is how I also pushed this process to 5 years or something. And then also later I tried some complicated forms also. I mean, in the beginning I have started with the simple forms, but later also I tried complicated my drawing, which I was doing hand-free drawing, which I wanted to try and combine with this process. So I took the help of my computer, and since then I pixelate my all drawings, and all the drawings which I project on my jute surface and draw. And this is quite complicated process to explain every time for me, but this is how I also tried complicated drawings. And then later also I realized that if I can create a play of dark, middle and shadow in this, so I also started painting on the surface of jute. And also then when you see closely this jute painting, you'll see there are 3-4 layers. So first is canvas, thick jute, gateway tracing paper, paint, and again then fine jute. And then when all comes on the one surface, you see that three-dimensional result. This is how it's very easy to find for me in colors, but I wanted to try this in this material, and it took me more than a 10 year to discover, and so far I'm using these techniques in my work.
Yeah, but it's that intimate relationship between you and the material, and how you see that material's potential grow. And I think back to those forms, what I also love about those forms is how the complex forms that you mention in these paintings is that they also allude to time, right? Like that the time when you see like moisture or moss or cracks in walls, like they show like kind of when you just sit and look at a wall and you think nothing's happening, you see nature take it over. And that's something I love, imagining those patterns when looking at your work. I think your work is very much a still life of the materials you see around you, right? And like we said before, it's not the packaging material or the thing that you throw away instead becomes the center point, right? It becomes the protagonist. So rather than the jute being the cover for the wall, the jute itself to you is the wall. And something else I think is interesting here, like, so you were talking about transformation and how these jute canvases became wall drawings and murals. The other thing we haven't talked about is those threads that you pulled out of the canvas in your painting process. You started to transform those threads into sculpture, correct? Can you talk a bit about this transition into sculpture and three-dimensionality?
Yeah, I can. So what happened when I was in the process of pulling out thread and creating my pattern. So there are many jute thread was a discarded thread was in my studio. So I was thinking consistently that I can reuse sometime, and so I was collecting. I was not throwing somewhere. So, but also I did couple of experiments. Some of them totally failed. So again I was collecting this thread in my studio somewhere in the box, and a couple of years back I was keep collecting, and boxes are just increasing. And then once I saw that now there are too many boxes in the studio, and I thought I have to now. Finally I decided to discard these threads, and then I saw that when I opened those boxes, I saw that the thread have taken a box shape, and then I realized that my paintings negative become a positive of my sculpture, and this is how I understand that there is a possibility of a three-dimensional work in my next process.
And Manish, when did this happen? Like, how many years into working with jute did you discover this new potential for three-dimensionality? And I mean, this is something, the cube works are something you're very much known for. When did this breakthrough come to you?
In 2007, 2007 and 8, I did my first sculpture in Cologne. It was my first international show in Europe, a gallery called Casting Grieve, where I have displayed my first jute thread sculpture. So I discovered this in 2000, and it was going on, this small experiment going on. I remember that Pratik Raja, who visited in 2005 my studio, galleries Pratik Raja, and that time I made a small jute thread sculpture, but it was very different. I cut actually from everywhere by machine. The thick jute glued circular form which I cut it. So I was somewhere in 2005 I was pushing this, how to create this three-dimensional sculpture out of this thread, but it came very naturally, like I explained. So yeah, first time I have displayed in 2008.
Amazing. And then it's interesting, again, the form was a box, another form of packing material. And
Yes.
over time you started working with other packing materials, foam, cardboard, even like clothes sometimes clothes are used as packing materials sometimes too. It's interesting that like the form is a packing material, the box, and the material that you use inside is also tied with that. But maybe, can you talk a bit about I guess how sustainability is important to your work, and how how you're against this kind of useless discardment of packing materials, and maybe that ecological side of your work.
After jute, I realized that I can make by compressing jute threads. So after that, next step was I compressed actual jute, and then I saw the result of that flattened result of jute cloth folds, which really make me excited. And then also same time I also pushing myself to shifting and trying other materials and other mediums same time to work with it. Normally, Diana, we always I remember that in the class, whenever a teacher used to say that you have to try something different and in your assignment. So everyone, including me, we all try to see that how we can do different from others. But this is the basic thought which always I always keep in mind. We don't see front of us what we have, and we always try to search that or what we can do from different from everyone. So what I see in my home very first was so many discarded clothes which my mother was collecting to give ashram for charity, or sometime also in India there is if you can give this discarded or used cloth, you can get a new vessel. So this is also my mother was collecting for this purpose. And then I saw that in my storage room there are so many clothes. So next step was compressing the cloth and see the possibility. And then later whatever I saw in front of me, like daily newspapers or discarded cardboards, I started using all in my work, and this is how.
Yeah.
And then later also I have tried with different sizes and large scale, and this is how what artists do normally.
Absolutely. But I think what's interesting, Manish, is that like while you're an artist, you bring up a very interesting point here. You just spoke about your mother and her process of accumulating clothes as part of her process of living her life, is that you're actually collaborating with people in your neighborhood.
Yes.
And bringing them into your artistic process just through what they do
Yes.
in daily life.
Yes.
So maybe can you talk about how you shifted from being that individual artist in the studio with your jute canvas into a very different kind of work? If you can talk a bit about that would be great.
In the beginning, when I realized that this is the beautiful topic, and also the material which we are discarding, actually we are using for some time and discarding. So also it was a question that where this all goes. There is also in India actually there is always secondary market. Everywhere there is secondary market, but in India where is also even single thread been recycled, everything reused. So we also have this tendency to reuse naturally, but in the process till 1 or 2 or 3 cubes, I use all the clothes which we available at home so far, and then later I don't find more used clothes. So I also ask my relatives that if because I wanted to make more works, and also the I wanted to try larger scale work. So I ask my families and relatives, and so out of that also I made one series, and then also later I asked my whole community for this. So everyone helped me with this, and everyone has a different story of those clothes, and memories, uh, beautiful stories they have shared with me. Nothing to do with exactly with the work, but in a way it is for me uh, kind of a family portrait or community portrait or family album. You can see the lifestyle of middle class family through these cultures, uh, but also I was consistently thinking how to the way we are consuming these products, clothes or anything. It's very high time to think, and as an artist, how I can transform this into something else, which I don't know how to express this, but I'm quite happy that I got the idea of transformation of this discarded things. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's back to that idea of making something from nothing. And like we said before, like, while people interested in political histories or economic histories like me will go reading into the colonial history, or art historians will go reading into the parallels between arte povera and American minimalist artists when looking at your work, that's not where you're coming from. And I really love, like we were talking about yesterday, about how you have the process of feeling and being with and making the work from this material or this landscape around you of life in India. But then you let others read whatever they want into it, and you learn with those readings. Could you maybe talk a bit more about your process in the studio and how you get into this space of transformation with the material?
Yes, like I mentioned before that my main inspiration is my home but also the city. So I like Bombay. If someone is asking me where you're from, so I never say India, but I always, by consciously or unconsciously, I always say Mumbai or Bombay. So the city is very inspiring. Everything is, I feel, it's very high here. The volume is high, crowd is very high, the dust level is high. Within that, we also try to manage. Everything is together here. Like when you see all apartments, high-rise apartments, but also the same time all business malls or any other businesses also next to you quickly, but also you can see the middle class family homes. So what I observe, everything, and also the small factories, small businesses. So everything happened together in this city, where exactly my studio is the same thing. Where my studio is, the small factories, paper factories, small home businesses, but also same time next to it's a big mall or high-rise building. So it forced me to go reverse and to do something simple. The main important things is curiosity. I'm very curious to try different material and to see the possibilities. So more is curiosity than thinking behind or meanings for me. So curiosity, and then explore, investigation, and then transformation. These are main things I really look into my work more and more. This is how studio process normally, and it's not that you found quickly, but and what I observe many time, 99% the experiments are fails in this what you are doing, and what I learned personally is that what not to do. This is how happen normally in the studio.
Absolutely. And I think another great example of I guess your experiments, or maybe an experiment gone right, or a material that spoke to you in a different way, is the recent body of work with books, right? And we were talking about how you have text all around you. You work with newspaper, right? You have these, thousands of books around you, but you're not someone who goes and digests the written word as an avid reader. You're more of a listener than a reader.
Yeah.
But what I think is so interesting is how these texts, like the words or the meaning of the text gets stripped and it goes back into the materiality of the paper. Can you talk a bit about that process and your insight with all of these books that were left, that were just around you, and what you did with them?
So paper is a material which I have tried with newspaper very first time, because the newspaper which still like you mentioned before in your text, I remember that we still Indian enjoy newspaper with the breakfast. We are not that much digital yet in India, so there are many newspaper every day and in different languages. So I have also tried in my work newspaper by compressing, but very different method than usually I do. So newspaper, and then later I will also explain about the book sculpture. So newspaper is the paper what they use to print, which is very ordinary, and also ink is very ordinary, which if you pour in the water it goes quickly out, it goes away. So that result I really liked in my work. So when you pour newspaper in the water, so that faded result, it's not clear later. What remains, it's faded colors, which also I liked in my work, and then I use as a visual. But later also, after a long time, because I'm visiting so many secondary market, and I was collecting different materials like cardboards or newspaper, but also I was collecting same time old books, which cheap novels, which I keep collecting, because I always question that those are some of them new, but some of them also very old. So it's always like question how people quickly read and this quickly come into the secondary market, and then where it goes. So I was collecting many of them old books, the cheap novels, but also same time I liked the law books which I was collecting, which very thick, like 4 or 5 inches thicker, and because I have a tendency to try and compress whatever material I found in the beginning. I don't know what happened later, but I also tried with the books by hand in the beginning. Small novels I tried with the so what I have done is the compressing is very hard by hand to compress books, so I poured in the water for a few months, and then it was little softer than before, so I can easily compress by hand, and I saw the results quite beautiful, but still I can see the text. So I was not that happy, but also I have tried with the law book, and it's so difficult to compress by hand law books, and the same technique I have tried with the machine. So what I have done is those wet law books I have compressed in the machine, and the result was the amount of pressure which we gave it, the book turned into the almost crack rock or maybe marble visual. So this is how this experiment happened, and I saw the book have turned almost into rock.
We can talk about the importance of the local in your work, right? Like, so Manish, like, you're an artist from India, but I don't think you would ever describe yourself as an Indian artist, because your work is not trying to talk about India, but it very much talks about your city, Bombay. It talks about your neighborhood. Maybe can you talk a bit more about how the city and your neighborhood and locale come into the work?
Again, time to time, my studio was shifted. When I started after art school, my studio was my home. I mean, my bedroom was my studio. But later, my studio was next door. After couple of years, it was next apartment. But time also my work process been changing. It's more painting to sculpture and also more depending. So I was also, because there's in my work there is required carpentry, sometimes metal work. So all people started entering in my studio, and it was so difficult to manage an apartment where other people also stay. So also then I started looking my studio in the industrial estate where everyone make noise. so this is how time to time the studio place been changing according to my work. But also, there is always wish that there is one permanent space should be where I can go every day and work. But it never happened. Whenever I used to think about permanent space, my work used to change same time. So then I thought how to keep this idea alive. So I decided that the studio space should be in my mind, it should be more permanently in my mind, not physically, because there are people goes and comes, spaces will changes, but yeah, it is 5 centimeter in my mind. When my space changed, apartment to the industrial estate, where I saw the metal more and more. Not only matter, but different material, and the possibility how to use in my work, but also the workers which working with the metal or wood carving or any other things. So there are problems, but also the benefits same time of the new process, new beginnings. This is how yeah.
So, Manish, speaking about new processes and new beginnings, like what kind of new processes and beginnings do you see once you're able to come out of quarantine? Have you had any new insights in this time of doing nothing? And have you been working on models, or how have you been, as you said, you started working from home, then you went to an industrial space, now you're back in your home. How has the work transformed in this new space?
It takes little time to adjust, but soon I have started. There was no material for working, so I use drawing book of my 10-year-old son and few colors, and started some pencil drawing, and it excites me every day. So a couple of hours I was doing this every day in the morning, and then again in the evening some watercolors, small drawings. This is how I utilize my time in this quarantine, because of my mother and my father also staying in the same building, so I can frequently visit them. So I also since long I have not done watercolor portraits, which is also my main interest, you can say hobby that. So I did couple of drawings of my mother's faces and my son. This is how I started actually in the beginning, and then later I came with my actual small spontaneous drawings with the color pencils.
Manish, this is really beautiful. If we think about a way to close this conversation, like we started with the transfer of father to son, right? The transfer of your father's business and that material into the surface for your art making. But now we're talking about your son and how, working with his, right? Working with his drawings and working with him is what's fueling your inspiration right now. I think that's very beautiful. And I think that, hopefully if you feel comfortable sharing some of those drawings, I would love to see them. I'm sure people listening to this too.
Sure, I will share. But
interesting is that I'm an artist, and I was very good in academic portrait in my school in watercolor, but never I tried my portrait of my son. So and this lockdown gave me opportunity to paint his eyes. So I was studying every day his eyes, first in the pencil drawing and then later in the watercolor. It was beautiful experience.
You started off as a painter, and I think people get lost in that with all of your three-dimensional work, that it is coming from that.
Those are sculpture, but I always try to see that flat and flatten result to achieve even in my three-dimensional work. So the more approach is painter, I think. You have to explore these ideas. Sometimes we felt ki there is sometimes we felt we are trying, but there is nothing coming out. But that's what the struggle. You have to stay there longer time. You have to trust the material, and that is what exact struggle for.
Absolutely, but that's back to the waiting, back to the nothingness, back to that generative space of nothingness, and oneness is tied to that as well. So I think this is a beautiful conversation in tying together all of these massively different or massively diverse body of work, diverse periods of time, but all through that one beautiful concept. And I'll leave it, since we were talking about parents. My mother sent me this text the other day, which I love, where she was telling me that all the intellectual references in the world would never add up to me. And that's also for this conversation. I didn't want to focus on all of these references that don't tie to you and your personal experience, right? This is a very personal conversation. And I encourage people, if you want to learn more about Manish's work, there are some beautiful essays that are tying him into histories of Western abstraction or art in India. But I am so grateful, Manish, that you gave us this time to get a view into your world and your neighborhood and the city that you love so much.
Yeah, Diana, what I also, this lockdown teach me or give me that beautiful experience. I spent so much time with my parents after a long time, because this city is so fast and we are all busy with our own. Hardly sometime within the one apartment I used to meet my parents weekly once or twice. This is how I was busy since last 5-6 years. But in this lockdown, each and every day I was sitting with my mother and my father.
Well, the family is so embedded in the work, right? It's a family story. It's beautiful.
Yeah. That's what we try always to do something and see to everywhere, but don't see actually near to us or front of us. So that is what we have to develop, our receptor. What the Fukuoka is saying.
Yeah, that receptor. And I think, being receptive to our community is what's so important right now, and supporting each other and being receptive to what those needs are.